Hello, listeners! This is Black Sheep and Bad Apples, a podcast where we write our stories sober and deliver them in various states of inebriation. And I am your host, Loren O'Brien. Tonight, we are going to be talking about kind of how civilizations fall, but before we get into that, I want to introduce everybody in the conversation. So first of all, we've got, as usual, our producer, Sean. How you doing, baby?
I'm doing pretty swell, pretty okay, pretty alright.
Looking sharp, too, looking sharp. And we also have Mr. Sam over here. How you doing, baby?
What's going on, everybody?
Yeah, and as a special guest, Sean, into the air horns here, right? We've got Kevin motherfucking Porter! How you doing, Kevin?
Oh shit, making me feel special here. The internet just crashed on my end. It was just like, whoa, was that your name? Whoa,
Yeah,
Kevin Porter here. What's up, ladies and gentlemen?
So how are you doing tonight, Kevin?
I am high and ready to learn about history, Lauren, and thank you for inviting me on here.
Hell yeah, no problem.
Nice.
And so, Kevin, before we get started, I want you to, you were kind of like the inspiration for me kind of learning how to be a podcast. So where can people find you before we get into this history? What kind of things do you do on the internet?
Oh yeah, man, dude. People can find all about me on the podcast that no one listens to. That's right, Lauren. I said the podcast that no one listens to except everybody's listening to it.
Yes.
But that drops every single Friday. You can find that on all major internet locations for podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, all that. And then also I got if you're a professional wrestling fan, which I hope a lot of people out there, either like I'm a history buff and I'm a professional wrestling fan. We have a podcast called Are You Ready? A professional wrestling podcast that drops every single Monday at 4:20 in the morning.
Hell yeah. That's
All right,
awesome.
brother.
Yeah. And before we got on the mic officially, you were mentioning that you also did a podcast with your kid, which I want to highlight. Tell us more about that because it is cute.
Oh, dude. Oh, okay. So, yeah, dude, people can totally check out my archives on the podcast that no one listens to, dude. We've been doing the podcast for almost 4 years, and over the last 4 years, I've done probably about 3 to 4 different podcasts. You can find In the Mouth of Madness. You can find the Dragon Ball Z Happy Fun Time Hour that I did with my kid. He put out a good solid 50 episodes, dude. A+ for effort.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, you can find other various projects that are on there.
Hell yeah. Well, it's good to have you on, Kevin. And actually, I'm excited to announce tonight, for all you listeners, that we have officially gotten our shit together and are on Spotify. Yeah, we're on a bunch of different platforms now. We're on Spotify, Anchor FM, Castbox, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public. And it is almost exhausting to say that from day one.
I got tired just listening to you.
What have we made so far? About 4 cents?
We've made
money.
2 cents.
2 cents
entirely.
Oh,
Yes.
okay,
So
yeah.
all of the members of the podcast can expect to get their dividends in, I don't know, a
So
couple
we,
weeks.
We all get about a half a cent so far.
Somewhere in there. Kevin, I'm sorry, but we
Sean
can't
gets
cut you
1
in
cent.
to our monies
Yet.
yet.
Yeah.
Maybe we will one day.
I need to get on the ground floor on this one, guys.
Okay, so we had a little bit of a internet disruption, but what we were talking about is here on this podcast we discuss a lot of like right-wing grifters and charlatans and preppers and all that kind of stuff, and they toe this line of how the world is going to end. Doomsday preachers and preppers, like these people are always obsessed with the fall of society, whether it be like communist liberals coming to take our guns, or a race war, or Russian nukes, or even zombies. We as a society are fascinated with this.
Or revelations.
Yeah, or revelations.
There's a whole bunch of real nice, like, unassuming people that just are, they're like, yep, we are, like 4 years.
Can't wait.
4 years.
Yeah.
We all dying.
And so
Have some sweet tea, sugar.
So it is this fascinating idea.
They exist too.
that honestly, that I really like. Like I like to watch like the serious kind of shows like The Walking Dead that are about the end of the world, and then like the more hilarious like The Last Man on Earth. So we're all kind of fascinated by this culturally, and with the collapse of society, we often dream of what it would be if like these rules of society just collapsed, or if there was like nobody to be beholden to. And it's kind of fun to think about kind of dark to think about. But the fascination with the end of the world in particular kind of brought us to Capitol Hill riots, where people, the Trump supporters stormed into the Capitol because they thought the elections were rigged because of like blood-sucking Hillary and Joe Biden being a pedophile or whatever. I'm not sure like really what they believe. But what they were doing was basically they had this mindset of trying to stop the collapse of society. They wanted to stop the devil from taking over the White House and to keep communism or, again, whatever from destroying our country. And as a blanket statement, these people were trying to stop the end of the world in one way or the other. And so I got kind of curious, like, what does the fall of civilization look like? Like, what does the end of the world look like to people? And we've had a lot of these societies collapse in our history, so that's kind of what we're doing tonight. We're going to cover an overview of the fall of civilizations, but before we kind of get into into how they fall, I want to take you guys into kind of a journey on how they rise and define what a civilization actually is. And at the end of the episode, we are going to be discussing a specific civilization that I chose at random, and we're going to talk a little bit about the factors that led to their demise. So how you guys feeling about the end of the world so far?
Well, I know it.
I mean, I think it happened already a couple times.
It's the end of the world, and
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about the end of the world these days.
Hell yeah. So we're feeling good going into this episode. Hopefully we
whole
come
lot
out
of
of it.
positivity over here. You
It's
know
the
me.
end of the world, and I know it.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll feel
Right?
that same way coming out. And before we kind of talk about their demise, I want to talk about.
Fine.
I feel fine. Yeah.
I also feel
Really
fine.
high.
I'm gonna get those lyrics right now. We'll
No.
try and sing them later.
That's
That'll
all
be
we
the
need.
outro music.
So let's. I want to make a point to just note that there is a difference between a culture, a society, and a civilization, and so I want to kind of discuss that for a second. And so a culture represents the beliefs of a society, whereas a society represents the people who share those beliefs. So they can't exist without each other, and they're intertwined forever. In a series of customs, laws, styles of dress, architectural styles, societal standards, religious belief, and traditions, they're all kind of examples of a culture. And a society is a group with civility and norms, laws, regulations, and etc. And a society creates culture, and a culture creates society. So by contrast, a civilization is best described as embodying the entirety of cultures and societies in like a specific region under an organized and more or less peaceful structure. So I want for a second to look at civilizations as kind of a mosaic or like a stained glass piece. Civilizations occur when different cultures and different societies exist and interact, and they create like this complex relationship. And they kind of do and don't like each other, but they exist together. And this means that laws and customs and habits can be dramatically different between regions, but this interconnectivity and interactivity allows us to share all of this kind of shit. And so civilization isn't just a single society, but it's a bunch of things working as a single stained glass thing.
Right. We talk shit about the Bay Area, but we still buy all the gasoline that gets made there.
Exactly. And not only do we do that, but we kind of have to as a part of how our civilization works. And if that
Otherwise, you're just farming what you can where you're at.
exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so that it's not super complex, but there is a differentiation that I think needs to be made here, because when civilizations fall, they just turn into other societies and shit like that. And that's kind of like what I'm picking up from a lot of this stuff and
They oftentimes just fall apart into smaller,
societies.
more culturally based societies,
Yeah.
or
And we're gonna get into that a little bit more as we go, because it's so important, because these general regions take up these bigger, like it's a what's the term for, a micro versus macrocosm kind of thing. So we've kind of discussed what makes a society and culture different from a civilization, but we are only describing what it isn't. So the number varies depending upon who you ask, but in general there are at least 6 different characteristics that are need to be met in order to call something a civilization. So I'm going to cite from National Geographic here. Quote, all civilizations have certain characteristics. These include 1, large population centers, 2, monumental architectural structures and unique art styles, 3, shared communication strategies, which is very important later. 4, systems for administering territories. 5, a complex division of labor. And 6, the division of people into social and economic classes. End quote. So it's complex. Like these places develop in usually urban areas, and one thing that I really like about them is that they allow for people to not spend so much time just surviving. You know, that's the whole reason for civilizations. Like that's how we end up building up all this architecture. So one mark is that when we can no longer have everybody just trying to survive, that's how we create a civilization.
Well, when you build out a stone, right? All of a sudden your building lasts
Yeah.
a lot longer. And something like a flood is less likely to destroy it. So,
Yeah.
right, that gives that security for being able to do other shit.
Yeah.
Right.
And since we are talking about civilizations tonight, I wanted to talk about some of the earliest civilizations. And civilizations started in 3 different places separate from each other. And this is perhaps indicative that society and subsequent civilization are inevitable, like carcinization. By the way, carcinization it describes the process by which crabs have evolved and emerged 5 different times throughout evolutionary history. 5 different times. It's almost like they were inevitable to be made.
Well, they're like weird bugs.
Yeah, they're weird, perfect bugs.
There's always going to be a niche in the ocean for them.
Yeah, and so that's how I look at society anyway. Like I think it's almost inevitable in civilization beyond that. You know, it's like it's emerged so many times.
Provided the environmental conditions are met, I think you're probably right. Like it'll always happen.
Yeah. And so what do you guys know about our most ancient civilizations? I'm going to start with you, Kevin. What do you know about the most ancient?
Well, I'm a byproduct of the Yakima School District up here in Washington State, so not very much, Loren. I'm gonna level with you guys.
So, but what's the oldest civilization that you remember being taught?
Okay. So I definitely remember, learning about the Mayans.
Yeah.
Anything that comes out of Africa, I suppose, that always kind of seems like it's a very old place over there.
Yeah, for sure.
Those would be the 2 main ones that are off the top of my head, though.
Yeah, for sure. So, Sean, what do you know about the most ancient civilizations?
Ooh, I was gonna go Mayan as well, and probably because I know that it's not one of the oldest, but just because that's one that strikes to me.
You guys
that I
have
like
a very
lot.
current
It's
understanding of
fascinating.
history.
Yeah, they're not even
We're
close.
very fascinated
They're
by
not even close to being ancient.
I don't
Like
know.
that was 500 years ago.
Yeah, exactly, Kevin.
I want to go something in like either Egypt or like China.
Ooh.
One of the
That's a
two.
good
You
one.
know, I can't
Probably wouldn't
really.
be too far off with China. I bet China is one of the places where civilization developed very early on.
Well, what's your knowledge
I'm gonna
base
go.
say?
I'm gonna just go with the Euphrates and River Valley and the Mesopotamian
Yeah, that's
civilization. Is kind of like one of those benchmark civilizations. It's like off the top of my head, I want to say like 10 or 12,000 years old.
It's not quite that old, but yeah, it is one of the most ancient civilizations.
Like 8,000 BC.
Yeah, but again, it was about 4,000 to 5,000 BC.
Okay.
We're going to get into that here in a little bit. But the most interesting thing is, again, we're going to talk about how society or civilization developed on 3 different places. And so the first place I want to note, we're going to talk about
Atlantis.
China.
Okay.
The second one is going to be Mesopotamia, and the third is going to be in Central America. So, first of all, I'd like to talk about the
Can a city
oldest.
be a civilization?
Can a what?
A city be a civilization?
A
Kind
city
of like
is
San
a
Francisco.
product of a
Yeah,
civilization.
it's this. It would be a population center.
But could the entire civilization live within one city?
If it was big enough, I don't see why not.
Ooh, yeah.
But on a long enough
They're like-
time scale, we'll clearly cover like all of the East Coast with one city that probably comes in like inland like 20 miles.
It almost sounds like Sean's talking about like the Agenda 21 bullshit, where they're like, everybody's gonna be herded into big cities and given barcodes and microchips, and nobody's gonna live out in the woods. They're gonna reforest everything.
Dude, I can't wait for that to happen.
That's going to be so interesting to watch.
Man, if these right wingers are right, life is gonna be sweet, dude. God,
Yeah.
Government mandates? All right.
Hell yeah, dude.
I feel like most civilizations are destroyed by environmental conditions, and clearly our technology puts us in a different league than like Mesopotamia, which was killed by drought.
We're gonna get way
Right,
into
like-
that later. So
Right.
And we got Wi-Fi.
yeah, we got Wi-Fi.
We got
What's up,
Wi-Fi.
Mesopotamia? Suck it.
We understand how to like,
We on hot spots over here.
Well, anyway, so
desalinate water and shit.
So
like,
the latest we can date civilization
helpful.
back to may perhaps be what is in now modern day China. Between 10,000 and 9,000 years ago, Chinese civilization began in the Sichuan and the Hubei province. And this, in some places, is referred to as like the Yellow River. There's a couple of different names for it. But this particular culture isn't really well known, and they're considered the Yellow River civilization. And this was kind of
Just
the
ringing a
emergence.
bell.
Yeah, this is kind of the emergence of a bunch of various different cultures and societies. We're gonna fucking gloss over a lot of this. I apologize, listeners. But it is the Chinese cradle of civilization. It may be the source of one of the oldest and most continual civilizations in the world.
Kung Fu?
No, the first documented culture was called the Nangzhutu, and they existed between 8,700 BCE and 7,500 BCE, give or take. And this is the earliest Neolithic site in northern China. The site that the Nanjingtu, the site shows evidence for their having domesticated dogs as early as 10,000 years ago. So this is where we get our understanding of how domesticated dogs happen. It's pretty cool.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah,
I feel like
it's
I always
really
wondered
cool.
where dogs came from.
Yeah,
I feel like the domestication of dogs goes way further back than 10,000 years.
It may be, but what they found archaeological evidence dating back to about 10,000 years ago for this particular site. So I've heard, different historians will say it's between like 10 and 30,000. I personally don't have an opinion because I am not a historian or a biological science major. But around 10,000 years ago, we found dogs here. And also what we found here was like the farming of millet and the creation of pottery. And this all started again around like 8,500 BCE. The archaeological evidence of grinding slabs, animal bones, and stone tools all kind of indicate that these people were kind of working their way up through the Archaic Age and kind of becoming more modern. And not much is really known about this time in Chinese history, and that's because like written and recorded history start much later. They start about 6,000 years later. So we've got no idea as to what exactly was transpiring here, which I think is a really cool thing to kind of learn about, Like it's, how did this society do it?
Yeah, dude. It's crazy to think that they operated for so long without like actual written documentation, because it's just kind of like, oh yeah, you just type on your computer nowadays, or even just a pen or a pencil, and like, here you are, you're like, oh yeah, we're gonna go operate centuries upon centuries, and like, we're just gonna communicate with our mouths, that's it.
Yeah,
we're not gonna read.
And they did it so well too. Like apparently they did it so well that we exist now. So it's good on them.
Their
It's
language,
evolved for sure.
their language must have been so much more difficult back before there was written language, if that makes sense.
No, that's exactly what I was saying.
So
They
it's
exist
like-
way before written language.
Like English was hard? No. Like Chinese back in the 8,500 BCE.
Trying to remember your friend's pin. They're
Like-
like, it's 9614. And you're like, I don't know what that means.
I have no idea. You clicked at me.
So then, and I'm butchering this name, guys, but it's the Nanzhuangtu, something like that. And subsequent
Wang.
civilizations, something like that. They consisted mostly of farmers who traded with each other within the boundaries of like the natural borders of the region. And so modern Chinese history at this point starts around the Zhai dynasty in 2000 BCE. But the next place we're going to go chronologically speaking, because that is just one of a few different civilizations that occur. Where we're going to go next chronologically, if I can find my notes. Where did it go? There it is.
We got there.
It's
Bookmark.
Mesopotamia and Sumer. So you guys almost had it. Sumer and Mesopotamia.
Almost.
Almost.
So close.
Guys. But it's really interesting, actually, because we as Westerners do learn that Mesopotamia and Sumer are like the cradle of all civilizations. And then also, in passing, they're like, also China kind of had their own thing. And then...
Yeah.
But then they're like, the rest of the world explored...
European
out of
historians
Mesopotamia.
are the worst.
It is the worst.
About that shit.
Yeah.
I've like so many books that I've read where they're talking about like translations of stuff or people discovering things, and it's like a Japanese guy and a Russian guy discovered the same thing at the same time, but you will never hear about the Japanese guy in any of the books.
No.
Because
Exactly.
he was from Asia. I'm like, great, nice.
Yeah, and like,
Deep-seated.
white people invent stuff. Other colored people just have good ideas. Like that seems like to be the pervasive idea throughout history.
Oh, is that the new PC term? Other colored.
Well, I mean, if I'm just saying, if you're a white supremacist, that's probably your terminology.
Because white is a color, and we're all of color.
Whatever. I'm not going to discuss that here. But what I am going to discuss is we're going to
white and not
we're going
white
to discuss
is
Mesopotamia and the Sumer. And this is just going to be a brief overview of like middle school social studies real quick. They started between like 3000 and 4000 BCE, and it kind of varies a little bit there by almost 1,000 years. And they were able to achieve this through the rise of agriculture, which allowed for the creation of trade. And the reason trade arose is more or less due to the rise of building a surplus. So to have more than one needs means that one can trade for that which one wants. So it created this ability to like, hey, I want you to build this monument in my name, and I will give you all this grain. And people were like, fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Fuck
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Hell yeah, dude.
It was more like, I'm in charge.
Well, yeah, it was much more like that.
You are living on my land. I'll give you grain, but you must build this monument for me.
I would-
Otherwise, all these guys will stab you. I think there was a lot of that. Too.
Well, yes.
There was a lot of
There was
that.
a lot of that. And
A lot of civilizations were made of mostly that.
yeah, and as we discussed earlier, like, you know, as people began to farm, they'd be able
Super
to...
gangster.
So gangster, dude.
They were so gangster.
Bro, I got so much grain. What's up, Kevin? You want to fuck with me and my grain dog?
Yo, bro, let me get some of that grain.
I will give you
I got
some grain.
dirt to plant it in.
Dig me a ditch, dog.
Bro, you already know. You already know.
You already know. But yeah, as people get into farm, like they would create this surplus, and that would allow for people to just have jobs that weren't like for immediate survival, like what's the word for it? King.
Yeah.
And but with the rise of these civilizations, we could thrive together. And since people didn't have to practice farming, this allowed for, you know, all these different various professions to flourish within like localized regions. And as society during Mesopotamia emerged, it emerged between like the land of two rivers in modern day Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, and I think even a little bit of Syria. And it even eventually expanded out into what we know as like the Fertile Crescent.
Yeah, well, back then, that wasn't a desert. It was actually pretty nice. Arid grassland.
We're gonna get into some of that later too, dog.
Fucking date trees or date palms
Oh,
and fig
yeah.
trees.
Yeah, and again, as this civilization rose, they began to like do this really cool thing called writing, and they began pictographic writing about 4,000 years BCE. And societies and groups began to expand and create like other various like regional groups, which eventually lead to like the creation of the Assyrians who conquered Mesopotamia. And as time goes on, various other cultures and ethnic groups kind of move over and conquer and do all this like kind of exchanging of hands thing. And it like that's just kind of the brief summary of the second oldest civilization that we know of. Now our third oldest is in Central America, and it's called Caral Soup, and it is spelled Caral dash
Soup?
Supe, maybe, yeah.
Caral Soup.
Caral Soup, yeah.
Super.
And it's making me hungry, dude.
I was just about to say it's the least appetizing of all the civilization.
The most
names.
cannibalistic one out there.
And
Caral Soup.
we
So,
were
like,
talking about
we
The
ate
Walking
Carl.
Dead earlier, so no. But we're not going to go into it too in length. So I encourage any of our listeners and you guys here to kind of check it out in your own time because it's really cool. Caral Soup was discovered in 1948. It's an almost little-known civilization that emerged out of Peru around 26,000 BCE. So it's about 2,000 years after the. It's about 2,000 years after the Mesopotamians happened. That's not the right word for it. Whatever.
Existed.
Thank you. And it originally
Were around.
yeah.
Kicked it.
Yeah, so the Carl Stoops, they just like kind of kicked it about, I don't know, 2 G's years later after, dude.
It's like 2K year later, bruh.
No, but yeah, at first it wasn't really that interesting to
Pass me a
archaeologists,
flat bill.
but they learn more and more about it over like the 70 plus years that we've noticed it. And as it is a UNESCO heritage site, I'd like to read a little bit about the city of Cradle and the region of Carl Soup here. And this is again quoting from UNESCO.
Carl Soup.
You got something, Sam?
No.
Carl.
The fucking name.
Quote.
I'm a
The
child.
5,000-year-old, 226-hectare archaeological site of the sacred city of Carl Soup, is situated on a dry terrace overlooking a green valley in the Soup River. It dates back to the late Archaic area period of the Central Andes and is the oldest center of civilization in the Americas. Exceptionally well preserved, the site is impressive in terms of its design and complexity of its architecture, especially its monumental stone and earthen platform mounds and sunken circular courts. So it's got these big fucking just like arenas, basically. Continuing to quote, one of the 18 urban settlements situated in the same area, Cradle, which is just the city, features a complex and monumental architecture, including 6 large pyramidal structures, a quipu, which is the knot system used in the Andean civilizations to record information, was found on the site, and it testifies to the development and complexity of Cradle society. The city's plan and some of its components, including pyramidal structures and residence of the elite, show clear evidence of ceremonial functions, signifying a powerful religious ideology.
So they had like a city hall or something,
They-
like a state fairground.
Yeah, you could look at it. You could look at it like a
Like, yo, this is where the shit happens when we get together and we make shit happen.
yeah. Well, and consider it like metropolitan Portland, but all of the like the cities around Portland are like 20 times as small. Like they've got a fraction of the people that live there.
It's just
but
a
Portland
road.
is still a big city. And that's kind of what we're looking at with Cradle itself is the big city. It's Portland here. And then the region
Right,
around
right.
it is the Soup region.
Here's a great picture for you.
Yeah,
It's
it's
pretty
okay.
nuts.
you want to show that
It's
in the
got like
webcam
the
for Kevin?
arcade bar. You can.
God, is this gonna work?
Yeah, no, I can see that, dude. Yeah, man, looks like they were pretty advanced for their time, man. I mean, you said like 28,000 BC. Like,
Yeah.
Well, look
Yeah.
how round that
26,
circle is.
Yeah. And mind you that these are huge structures. So like society, and again, like that's why I wanted to bring up like carcinization, where like evolutionarily speaking, crabs have come up 5 different times. It almost seems like it might be inevitable when we're looking at how civilizations rise.
Crabs are as old as civilization.
Way
They are
older.
way older.
Like,
Way older.
it's been a thing
fucking
for
older.
so long. They're like, oh shit. All right.
it's just the world's giant itch, the crabs, right?
Yeah,
Never
for
go away.
sure.
She's always getting crabs, that old Mother Earth. Hussy.
So Cradle Soup is the oldest civilization in the Americas. And at this point, we've talked about 3 different places from which civilizations kind of originally arose. And the older civilization, like the older it is, the harder it is to determine like why exactly it fell. And so the question of many abandoned sites has always been like, what caused civilization to fall? And that's exactly what we're looking at tonight.
What happened was
Yeah, and so having said that, we're going to talk a little bit about how nations develop, and then we're going to go into a short break for you listeners. Here, we're not actually going to, but we're going to talk about how civilizations develop. So civilizations, they don't emerge out of nowhere, as we've kind of seen. There's like a development stage that they must enter into before they kind of make it all the way up to the title of civilization.
It's the original HOA.
I would argue it's more like getting an entry-level job and working your way up to manager.
Yeah, argue what you want. Rules are rules.
rules are rules.
I want to live where I want to live under my terms.
Yeah. you tell
And
them,
better
Sean.
not put anything on your roof either.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
Not even a fucking blow up Santa Claus during the holidays.
Don't you put your
Taxes.
fence
Fucking tacky bitch. So there are three factors that determine a civilization and how it kind of expands through the world. And this is trade, conflict, and exploration. These factors, they all kind of lead to the development and like continuation of civilizations. So we're going to talk about trade. And in trading on the Silk Road allowed the Khmer region from like Southeast Asia to expand by traveling to India, Africa, and Europe. And this also kind of benefited like Genghis Khan and blah, blah, blah. And we can kind of see how important trade is to civilization when we look at things like our episode on the Molasses Flood and the trade agreements held in the Caribbean by European colonial powers. Like, trade is this huge thing for developing nations in order to expand. And these European colonizers in these early episodes, they brought with them the second step, which is conflict. And it's the next step in developing a civilization because it allows for like the ruling class to create like an us versus a them, like a common enemy. And it rallies people within the region to create sort of a regional pride, you know what I mean?
That's why we need aliens.
We need aliens. We need to defeat the aliens on behalf of Earth.
Build a pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also good for like power exchanges conflict, because like some civilizations don't collapse; they just like change names, and conflict can cause the downfall of civilizations. So one has to be strategic in their planning. And a good part of like colonial planning was our next step in development: exploration, because you have to find new methods, you have to find new foods and resources, and these all allow for like a civilization to stay up to date. For instance, if you're in World War II using World War I guns, you're not going to get a whole fucking lot done.
Was that the last
And you're
charge of
fucked.
the Light Brigade?
Yeah, you are fucked. And so this kind of exploration and expansion is very necessary. And, you know, as exploration happens and conflict happens, people gradually just, you know, expand their arena and end up taking up this huge part of society, and they just absorbed all these other societies and they acquire all their resources. And you know, what goes up must come down. And so we're going to take a short little break because when we come back, we're going to talk about how things kind of fall really quickly sometimes.
Often a lot faster than they rose.
Often, a lot more often, yes. But having started here, how do you guys feel about the things you're learning in our social studies class?
Educated.
Yeah, educated is a good way to put it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, dude.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, when we get back, we're going to get more educated.
And get to that good old learning.
And we're going to learn if some of these doomsday sayers maybe have anything, like maybe they're right.
If I lash out, will you hit me with the ruler?
I'll hit you with so much.
Ooh,
You know what I'm going to hit you with? You know what I'm going to hit you with first, though, Sean? A break.
A break.
ooh.
God.
Here's some commercials. Mary and Antoinette's Exotic Sweetbread Bakery and Butcher Shop. We've been open on and off since Ma went to prison. Starting as a household necessity, we converted that into a business where we strive to serve some of the finest and most exotic meats there are, including capybara, cassowary, hyena, and starfish.
Also available, fresh baked breads hand-delivered daily between the hours of 3 and 5 from Ma's Prison Kitchen.
Daily sweetbread specials include sea pig sweetbread, alligator sweetbread, albatross sweetbread, and occasionally long pig.
Located in the Whispering Pines Trailer Park Food Court off of Highway 76, Bill Street, exit 47, left at the text code, then a right a half a mile past the Bill Murray Memorial Park next to the bridge. If you hit the clam, you've gone too far.
Brought to you by Toxic Positivity.
Hey bro, you gonna peel that onion?
Hella mi amigo. But, dude, this is lame. Like, why can't peeling onions be awesome, Hermano?
I know bro, hella lame.
It's so lame, I say.
So lame.
Hey, bros.
It's Chad Johnson's!
Peeling onions can take like so many hella days. And it's like lame. Like hella lame. For chicks and bros alike. But like, have no fear of stuff. Because I'm Chad Johnson's. And I'm here to tell you about my super dope invention. Chad Johnson's is Extreme High Velocity Onion Peeler.
Whoa, bro. How, bro?
Here's how, bros. You take your onion,
Cha, bro?
and you throw it hella hard at my patented Chad Johnson's extreme high velocity onion peeler. That's it, bros. That's it.
Bro.
I know.
Just in time for the holiday season, the Fauci Elf by Health on a Shelf is an adorable addition to your seasonal decor. His smiling face waits to greet your family members staying over for the festive season. Unlike years gone by, health and wellness is of the utmost concern, and as such, the Fauci Elf is here to help.
'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house, Fauci Elf was here, as quiet as a mouse, to test your aunt, your uncle, and grandmother too, to make sure that no one gets an additional flu. When the house has all settled for their long winter nap, Fauci Elf has science and a jingly hat. One swab at a time, no nose he will spare. With health on a shelf, they'll know that you care.
The Fauci Elf.
And we're back. We were talking about how societies kind of develop and how they kind of sustain themselves and expand. And we're coming back and we're kind of talking about how civilizations fall. So do you guys have any thoughts before we kind of continue along this path?
Anarchy is cool, dude. All I gotta say is when shit goes awry and shit breaks down, I'm all for it.
I respect that perspective. In fact, I would say that I like it.
I don't know how I really feel about that.
Well, and it's honestly because like chaos forms around this kind of like descent into it's.
I can appreciate that, like, you know, we humans are like the phoenix. You know, we rise from the ashes, and fire is a cleansing, you know, chaos. That's like a reorganization of things oftentimes leads to, you know, paradigm shifts and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
but I think about, you know, like what that would be like total anarchy, and it just sounds like a lot of really stressful shit.
Well, and,
Like a lot of like, am I just gonna have to shoot this person? Like a lot of mistrust, a lot of like people trying to shoot you, or you know what I mean? Like rape becomes like a big thing again.
well, and I see anarchy is kind of more of like a regional understanding of things. And so like when the what were they called? The British East India Trade Company, when they took over like a third of the
Those
world.
awesome guys.
Yeah, those awesome guys. What they did was they essentially took British rule and they were like, everybody has to listen to us now. And then over the course of, it was like 100 years or so, all those different colonies that they owned were like, fuck you, get away from us. And they rejected them. And so it's kind of in and of itself this form of anarchy, and it's an anarchy that's like colloquial rule. And that's kind of like the thing that I'm noticing over and over again as we do this research into the fall of civilizations, is that regionally speaking, people want to govern themselves, and when they feel unlistened to, shit's gonna start going bad.
For sure, but those are also like regional power structures.
Of course,
It's
yeah.
not just like the proletariat masses, if
Yeah.
you will. And so when you remove, I don't quite count that as anarchy. That's like one power structure saying we've got a system here, fuck off.
Well,
And so yeah,
in the sense that anarchy is autonomy, I think that it kind of really hits the mark.
So when you said anarchy, what I'm thinking is that what occurs when there is a power vacuum,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden every little faction is now vying to become the new leader of the local civilization, cultural, you know, group, whatever.
Yeah,
There is no leader, bro.
There is no leader.
Right. And so in that,
The
that
hypocrisy of
stuff,
anarchy.
that stuff is oftentimes like not really great for, you know, the common person, I think.
Yeah. And so, steering away from anarchy a little bit, let's get back into kind of how civilizations fall. Because there's a couple terms that they use for it, and it's societal collapse or
Get it?
No, try again.
Civilizational collapse. Damn, that was hard.
Also known as
You're fucking me up.
Nice.
Civilizational collapse.
Civilizational collapse.
And the reason that's hard is because it doesn't look like it's in the dictionary, but it is actually a very scholarly term. Yes. so
Right. Well, generally words that are that fucking hard to say are scholarly.
yeah.
They're
So
in the dictionary.
Super
You
easy
just-
to write down.
You gloss over them when you read them.
Yeah.
It's like, and next.
yeah, I know what that means. I'm done.
Kinda get it.
And so societal collapse and civilizational collapse, nailed it. These are in most cases kind of caused by like a house of cards collapse. See, our civilizations and underlying societies are tightly connected. And it sounds kind of cliche, but this tightly connected organizational process is what kind of brought about like the toilet paper shortage last year that we talked about on this podcast. When one card falls, the rest will follow. And because of the complex way we get toilet paper, it doesn't take a whole lot to overwhelm the system. It literally only takes like you guys, you might want to go get toilet paper right now because it's a shortage. And the whole fucking system will collapse. Like it
Take
doesn't
your money out of the bank.
It doesn't take much. And since our societies and civilizations are such complex systems, there's a lot of factors that govern them. And so we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit here. And these factors include like the economy, the environment, demographics, there's society and culture. And much like none of this stuff exists without each other. Like once you create this mosaic, this stained glass piece, all of this stuff interacts with itself. And it can't exist without the other. It doesn't exist within a vacuum, I guess, is what I'm saying. And for instance, like a hurricane in the Caribbean may cause like refugees to flee, and these people might have to go somewhere, and that changes the demographic makeup of that region, even if it's just slightly. And these people that bring in their culture, that is reacted upon by the local culture, and so on and so forth. So there's so many complex things involved in like the ever-changing tides of what is a society and a civilization. And we're not going to be able to break down everything here. But these aren't really the only factors that lead to collapse. They're kind of umbrella terms to describe social upheaval. And so what I want to do next is kind of discuss the couple of ways that society gets really impacted. And the first way that we're going to discuss is like climate change and natural disasters. And like because we're so intertwined and we don't have the luxury of living without each other. And so this is kind of exemplified with the drying of the Green Sahara. So 2 or 3 million years ago, glaciation caused the monsoon season that typically went over the lush Green Sahara to change. And as the Earth's climate began to warm back up, this caused a long-term changes in the North African climate cycle. And this is about a 41,000-year process. And this disruption caused the monsoons to dip further and further south, which meant that the Sahara wasn't getting as much rain. And as the planet began to lose these ice sheets, desertification of the Sahara, began, and this change of climate also led to monsoon seasons in South and Southeast Asia to be disrupted. And
this is like as an ice age is ending,
as
and
it's
the
ending.
ice sheets are receding towards the poles.
Yeah, so 2 or 3 million years ago this started, and then it's receding a little bit more closer to our modern day.
Right.
And as these were like receding and the changing of seasons happened, it would cause a lot of like crops to go all weird, and especially in like in what would later became the Akkadian Empire of Mesopotamia. As this monsoon season moved about 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, it fucking fucked up all the crops everywhere. And so we do get to see this like how the environment changes civilization here. Like it is not super easy. And in fact, I wanted to do an entire podcast about this next thing, but I figured it fit really well in here. Because volcanic activity also plays a role in climate change, and medieval scholar Michael McCormick nominated the year 536 as, and I quote, the worst year ever.
Neat.
Now, again, like I wanted to do this as its own episode, but the reason it was the worst year ever was because of volcanoes, or probably volcanoes. Like it's a very complex subject, and we're not going to get into all the details, but early in the year of 1536, Krakatoa exploded, probably. I know.
Probably.
Probably.
George Washington. Probably.
David Keyes, an archaeological correspondent with the London newspaper The Independent, theorizes that the eruption of Krakatoa, as documented by the Javanese Book of Kings, they said that it occurred in 416, but contradictorily, he found evidence in like ice core samples and information collected from like tree rings that does confirm that in 536 ash and dust were thrown into the air, likely due to a volcano. And it's equally likely it could have been like a meteorite, but it's kind of hard to like, we're getting too far into the weeds getting into some of these theories.
Right. A big fucking meteorite.
Yeah, the point being that this year and the subsequent years were fucking shitty. Michael the Syrian, he was a patriarch of the Syriac Orthodox Church between 1126 and 1199. He wrote that between the years of 536, our worst year ever, and 537, the sun hardly shined at all.
Oh, whoa.
And I'm going to quote from him here. Quote, "One had never seen it before, and nowhere is it written that such an event had happened previously in the world. If it were not true that we found it in recorded in most proven incredible writings and confirmed by men worthy of belief, we would not have written it here, for it is difficult to conceive. So it is said that the sun was darkened and that its eclipse lasted a year and a half, that is, 18 months. Every day it shone for about 4 hours, and yet this light was only a feeble shadow. Everyone declared that it would not return to the state of its original light. Fruits did not ripen, and wine had the taste of what comes from sour grapes." End quote. And
So they drank a lot, and they were like, "Man, this wine tastes like shit."
Definitely. You'd be drinking every day if you didn't.
Four hours a day,
Put it into
kinda?
perspective. If we had no scientific understanding of why the sun, like why the sky looked the way it did this summer.
You got an
You know what I mean?
explanation for this? No, I don't.
Imagine if there was no forest fire nearby, but the sky looked like that still.
yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like, oh no, I'm drinking. This is the end of the world. This is the apocalypse. This is Revelations. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of drunk monks.
Yeah, it's a very fun story. And this story is also like because I want to be as like transparent as I can. The story is also corroborated by the quote Gaelish Irish Annals, and in one of the annals, that's called the Annals of Ulster, and its report was written and it basically said the same thing as the Annals of Innsfallen, and so I'm going to quote from both of those here. A failure of bread from the years 536 to 539 A.D. So again, we can corroborate these were fucking shitty years.
Yeah, it sounds like 536 was really giving 2020 a run for its money, dude. I mean, like, albeit, I mean, we had to stop the way we were living and everything, but damn, 536, dude, no sun for a whole year and a half, dude. I mean, that's pretty shitty.
Right. Put that shit in perspective a little bit.
That's what, you know, the podcast episode that I wanted to do on the worst year ever was gonna be about the comparison. And once I started learning about this, I was like, there's no comparison.
That's why they
2020 ain't shit, dude.
2020 ain't shit, dog.
That's why they called the annals. Everybody was looking at their wives. They're like, "Come on, baby, we ain't gonna live too much longer."
Let's go for some annals.
Come on, just like one time in your life.
That's on record forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and since we're not covering the worst year ever, I just want to summarize by saying, like, during this time, disease, famine, failed crops, and just blisteringly cold winters hit the entire world. In fact, in August, it caused snow to fall in China, which is very unusual. And so it made the year 1536 regionally and the years following just some of the worst years ever.
Right. It was like a nuclear winter.
Yeah. And so these are kind of the changes that I'm talking about when it comes to the weather and that have kind of changed the dynamics of civilization. I didn't get too much into how civilization changed because I think it's pretty apparent how civilization would change with all that kind of shit going on. But civilizations, they don't just have to deal with the weather, they also have to deal with each other.
The harder part.
That's what I was getting into.
And so this part is about foreign invasion and mass migration. Smarter people than I can talk more about immigration in its contemporary setting. So that like there's so many details to consider when we're talking about migration and all this stuff nowadays that we're just not gonna get into any of that. But what we are gonna do is talk about how foreign invasion, mass migration played a role in the collapse of ancient civilizations, because I think it's more important for kind of the context we're looking at here tonight. For instance, the mysterious sea peoples and these
Atlantis. I knew it would get that.
they were literally only known as the sea peoples because nobody knew where they were from. And historians have kind of theorized that they could have been victimized by like changing climates too. And so it's kind of hard to figure out who they were really.
They were just a bunch of sailors that were gender neutral.
But
Keeping it topical.
so the sea peoples, they emerged during the late part of the bronze, what's called the Bronze Age collapse. And so during this time, the Egyptians had just fought the Hittite Empire. So try to keep up here. And during this battle, the Egyptians had weakened the Hittite Empire to such a degree that it began to show signs of collapse. A treaty allowed the Egyptians, the people who beat them, to give the Hittites food and food supplies, like to give them everything that they could need to survive, to keep their nation going. Because they had created kind of this treaty. That wasn't quite enough, and the Sea Peoples exacerbated this in 12 BC, or 1200 BC rather, by attacking and seizing a major port on the west coast of Asia Minor. This erupted the entire Hittite supply line of grain and further caused the collapse of the Hittites. And so this is just one example as to how civilizations collapse and are also like assimilated into others, because they were later captured by the Assyrians, and that was the ultimate cause of their collapse. And so
The Law of Unintended Consequences.
yeah, and so like mass migration and foreign invasion, these things are like really big problems, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a little bit. But I also want to talk about like economic depression and famine and internal conflict and how they lend themselves to societal collapse. So after the Egyptians had defeated the Sea Peoples, so the Sea Peoples had kicked the shit out of the Hittites, causing their decline, and the Egyptians were like, fuck these guys, and beat the absolute shit out of the Sea People. And the Egyptians, after that, they also suffered an economic decline. And this was kind of because a lot of other societies in the Mediterranean at the time were kind of collapsing. The Eastern Mediterraneans were just they'd been interrupted, that their trade routes had been disrupted, and all of this kind of led to this economic depression and this widespread like kind of famine that occurred. And interestingly enough, this led to one of the first labor disputes in history, as government officials in Egypt were being underpaid. And this labor dispute even went as far as to undermine the Egyptian royalty at the time. So it's kind of a cool story about people like the economy collapsing.
Did they have to hit up the aliens for the pay raise? They're just like, hey guys, we need a little bit of a kickback here building these pyramids, okay?
That's probably where they got all that gold. Mm-hmm. It probably just revitalized their economy.
Yo, we need some LZs in here.
Aliens just showed up, dropped off a bunch of golden idol statues.
Hell yeah. They were like, here, peasants, and then the rich people collected it and were like, we'll pay you in bread and beer to build our pyramids.
Wasn't there a historical document about this? Stargate.
Ancient Aliens.
Stargate.
Oh.
Kurt Russell's the man, dude.
Yeah, it's so good.
And so infighting began amongst like these various political factions in Egypt at this time, and simultaneously famine was rising due to a near drought. And this was caused by the Nile like not flooding as much as it usually did, which is weird because it's kind of the opposite in modern days. Like if things flood, it's super bad. But back then the Egyptians
what year
were like,
are we at?
hell yeah. This is about 12,000 BC.
Okay.
Or rather 1200, excuse me. And it's just shortly after that.
I was like, okay.
Yeah. And so food prices during this time shot up to 8 times their normal value in Egypt. And at one point, they even reached up to 24 times the normal price. So like bread was astronomical to buy. It was just impossible. And this inflation lent itself to the already struggling civilization, and shortly thereafter the Libyans and Nubians began their onslaught. What once had been a strong, unified Egypt quickly descended into a deeply divided, weakened state and eventually was conquered by the Libyans and Nubians.
Right, the Nubians from the south.
Yeah, and
the
the Libyans from the east.
Right.
Or from the west.
No, the east.
No,
The south.
Oh, you're right. You're right. I'm thinking of,
Maybe the north.
well, the
Yeah.
Mediterranean's north.
yeah, and so in this story, we can see that Egypt didn't really have too many people to fight, and then at the same time, all these other economic, like, if they could have expanded their empire, they could have maybe established these trade routes, but because these trade routes that they had no control over were collapsing at the same time their power was collapsing, this allowed for people to invade them and to be eventually, they would become the Libyans and Nubians for a little while, but that would also change back into Egyptians. Again, history is really complicated and people
Well,
are
the Nubians
constantly becoming each other. So
Yeah, I feel like I read something like a National Geographic article that was talking about this, about that specific conflict where the Nubians ended up taking over pretty much all of Egyptian society on some level or another, and that from like going forward at that point, like all the ruling class was not just Mediterranean.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know enough about it to really speak to that degree, but I know that shit got fucked up.
She got interbreeding. That's what it got.
So how you guys feeling as we
Best
continue
part about conquest.
as we continue
Mixed
along this
babies.
path of conquest and destruction?
I mean, because it's so long ago, it's neat.
It's really cool. What do you think, Kevin?
I think it's really cool, man. I like the last part that you were talking about how like Egypt became like a new country and then it went back to being Egypt. So it kind of makes me think of like, what if like the United States took over Canada, and then we got this huge ass United States, and then just at some point just like we're gonna let you go back to Canada now. It's just becomes something that goes into the history books there.
Are you advocating invading the Canada?
Well, South Park did it, and when South Park calls for it, well, I can get behind that.
You can get behind that.
So, like, you remember back in the day when you used to be able to go to North Oklahoma?
You heard it here first. The podcast that no one listens to advocates invading Canada.
Oklahoma and never mind.
Anyway, so the next thing we're going to talk about is disease, because since we're currently kind of experiencing a plague of our own, it's kind of interesting to look at it a little bit. We're not going to get too into it because it again, all of these topics are just so expansive, and we could go on forever about them, and we just don't have enough fucking time. But with the rise of agriculture, this is when people began to like build these urban communities, which meant that they were closer together, which means contagious diseases were easily spread amongst each other. And again, we're not going to go into it too much, but I think it's important to note, because of what we're about to talk about later, is that people like Genghis Khan literally catapulted diseased bodies over castle walls
Oh, yeah.
Oh
in
yeah,
their
that
reign
was-
of terror.
Yeah.
That was yeah, for sure. That was a tactic used everywhere.
Yeah, and
Dead horses.
yeah, and so again, for now, it's important to note that diseases like
Fetch it a mush. Huh?
What-
Fetch it a mush?
when it comes to the idea of like invasion, diseases, they often really highlight the cracks in governments and nations. And they can drive a wedge into societal structures and uproot peaceful and prosperous nations, which I don't think is that far of a parallel from where we are now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, dude. I think man. Like right now, dude, it's like China's just like, hey, man, what's up, America? Achoo, and then just fucking chaos ensues, dude.
Yeah, and like I don't blame China like this. Like for instance, the Spanish flu of 1918 probably originated in Kansas. Like I don't blame most of these people for the things that
I don't blame him either, but I'm
Yeah,
just saying.
but for real, it's like nobody can control this, and so like if you can weaponize this thing that you can't control, hell yeah, dude, hell yeah.
That's totally illegal.
It is now. It wasn't. It wasn't
Here
back then.
now.
Not that means a fucking thing, by the way.
It's only illegal where it's recognized.
I'm just saying, I think that once war starts, atrocity always occurs. So, I mean, that's just a part of it. That you just make war illegal then.
Oh wait, so war's the bad one?
Yeah, war's war's the bad one. Famine's like the ooh, it's time to play video games one, and what was the environmental conditions? I don't
right.
really, surfing.
So speaking of characteristics, which isn't a good segue, characteristics of like falls of society and civilization, demographics also plays this like kind of big role. And we kind of talked about migration and invasions, but briefly put at one point, the Greek world found itself in a falling birth rate. Like the Greeks didn't have enough people fucking to make babies. And that's because people were way more interested in like fucking and not having babies.
Yo, bro,
you know, they were really into like fashion and money, and they were just like, you know, like
super into pulling out.
We're gonna fuck each other, and not have
Japanese society.
Yeah,
isn't that happening there? Like a real
kind
decline
of
in birth rate.
And so, interestingly enough, this also occurred with the Japanese currently. All of this happened during the Greek days with the absence of wars and epidemics. People weren't like panicking and they weren't at war.
It got so good.
Yeah. So it got so good that people would rather go and enjoy life than get married and fuck each other and raise kids. And those
if you think you're going to go off and die in war, like you definitely want to knock some chick up first.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You're like,
Yeah, and so those
you
who
think you're just going to a...
I mean, militarily speaking, you want your soldiers to have kids so they'll be more willing to sacrifice their own life.
If you just think you're going to another free concert downtown,
interesting insight.
You'll be back later.
Right. There's time for kids later after I pull out.
Yeah, and so during these Greek days,
I never pull out.
The people who did have kids only had like one or two, and so it wasn't that good for Rome. Or it wasn't that good for Greece. And shortly thereafter, in Rome, the romantic notion of love began being popularized. And this also gave women way too much freedom, as they were known for divorce, extramarital affairs, and reluctance to have kids.
Hold on.
Way too much
freedom. Let's visit that statement real quick.
We've opened up rules and
I'm
laws.
gonna just go ahead and say that I'm not gonna agree with the sentiment.
We did this. There. We did this in the 1900s. We gave
So,
you a little more, but then you took
The
so
fall
much.
of society. The fall of society is preempted by women having way too many freedoms.
Way too much freedom.
According to the Greeks and Romans.
Oh, yeah.
Because again,
according to the Greeks and Romans, as translated by a bunch of Christians for like 1,000 years.
And here's the thing, because like it was the upper class that viewed this as a threat, and they saw this as a threat to like society and the political establishment, and
right.
Yo,
so
you need
they gonna put up with that bullshit.
You need to make babies, not rules.
And so Roman laws introduced the Romans introduced laws that obligated people to marry. Men between 20 and 60.
What was this? What period? What time period?
You would have to look it up, honestly. I don't know the exact date. It's between Greeks and Romans. Like they exist almost in parallels there. So it's somewhere in between the two. And so men between 20 and 60 years old and women between 20 and 50 years old were obligated to marry and have kids. This extended to divorced or widowed people within that age group as well. And the reason for this was very simple. In a speech to the Roman nobles, the emperor expressed...
She just died.
In a speech to the Roman nobles, the emperor expressed concern, stating that freed slaves had been granted citizenship and that Roman allies, who were foreigners, were taking government office. And like, this was all fine and dandy, but the original stock, in air quotes, meaning like the people who were born there and aren't immigrants. Yeah, they weren't being replaced, was his complaint. And citizens, they just weren't reproducing as fast as foreigners. And so, if you guys remember our episode on the evil and abusive world of pickup artists, you'll remember we discussed that creepy old guy, Ovid. Yeah, he had this in his writing, Nux. Ovid. He wrote this about these times, quote, "But since more plenteous honor has come to plains that yield a sterile shade than to any three, we fruit-bearers, if as a nut tree I am counted among them, have begun to luxuriate in spreading foliage. How apples grow not every year, and injured grapes and injured berries are brought home. Now, that would seem beautiful harms her womb, and rare in these days is she who would be a parent.
Oh, that's like there's
What a pompous ass.
A straight slut shaming, dude.
there's like a 10 out there, but then there's like a Greece 10, which is really like a 5.
A Greek 10?
Yeah, they're like, yo, like when you're stuck in the same town forever, small town.
Well, this was Rome.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, they're like when you're forced to fuck.
So
They're like, yo,
Italian.
you're gonna go to jail unless you fuck somebody, and everybody's looking around with their friends, and they're like, I don't really want
Oh,
to.
do you remember from the apple episode? What civilization was it where you threw an apple at somebody?
The Greeks.
The
It was
Greeks.
the Greeks,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So like a lot of apples being fucking wung around.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Jeez.
They were just like, well, if I have to,
Kevin's
you're
like,
good
what the
enough.
fuck are you guys talking about? So you
No, dude, you got to settle at some point, you know.
in Greek society,
I mean, if
you used to
it's-
throw an apple at somebody, like, hey, and threw an apple at like some chick. That's basically like you going like, I want you, and if she catches
get her
the
attention.
apple, if she catches the apple,
She's
that's
like,
her
"I
like
want
reciprocating back your
You
feelings.
now no
Or she's
longer
like really
gone-
good at baseball. Like, I'll be a catcher.
Oh shit. She
So-
catches so many apples, bruh.
When it's law, you're just chucking apples at chicks, and you're like, fuck it. If she catches it, I'll fuck it. Like that's where I'm at. I don't know what else to do.
And the streets were pasted with crushed apples. and
They were
broken
pasted
hearts.
with crushed apples. And so, in summary, we've kind of talked about how civilizations like develop and like what they are and how they expand and how they kind of become themselves and how they also collapse and kind of what looks like that. But for the end of this episode, I really wanted to delve into some examples. But time will only allow us to really delve into the one of them. And so at random, I kind of picked a civilization. You guys are going to hear about it here in a minute. But for now, I want to introduce you guys to Luke Kemp. He is a researcher at the Center for the Study of Existential Risk at the University of Cambridge. And he wanted to explore why collapse happens to societies and civilizations. And in his research, he encountered the 12-volume, and I quote, magnum opus. So this is a big fucking deal when it comes to history. And this was written by the historian Arnold Toynbee, and it was entitled A Study of History. And Kemp noticed
Twimby?
Toynbee, something like that.
Arnold Twimby.
Yeah.
Fucking racist dick.
And so Luke Kemp noticed that it basically ended in saying that, quote, civilizations aren't murdered, they commit suicide. And Kemp kind of wanted to see how true this was and was curious as to the average lifespan of a civilization. And after he came to several conclusions throughout his research, but one of those was that the average civilization takes about 336 years to collapse.
So we still got time. We still got time.
We still got
We
time.
got like 20 years, man.
20 years, yeah. and like this is an average for like ancient civilizations, so like we don't really have to worry too much because, you know, one nation can live 1,000 years and another nation can live 2 years, and it all gets worked into this average. So we really have to take what an average is and kind of put it into focus.
Wait, what's an average?
I'm not going to get into it again. But again, like a part of this conversation was like, are we living in a collapsed system? And due to our social resilience and our
Based on an average?
I mean,
Is that
on
what-
average, I feel pretty collapsed in the civilization most days.
But
I feel
not
as
on
well.
average. I think we're doing pretty strong.
yeah, we went to the fucking moon, so
Dude,
Yeah.
the
we
Yankees,
just landed a fucking rover on
the
Mars
Yankees
again.
have won the World Series how many times?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
come
got to
on.
be real.
20?
money.
I don't know.
Well, and like, so are we living in collapse like system? And probably not. Like, and it's due to the societal resilience, but among historians and like researchers, we also don't know. And there's a lot of potential for collapse, but that potential doesn't ensure it. While our economics are becoming more and more powerful and resilient, we're also becoming more and more interconnected and well armed. Our interconnectivity may benefit us, but our weapons may be an issue. Kemp uses an analogy called the rungless ladder to describe this a little, and it's a bit long, but I'm going to read this quote from the BBC article.
The rungless ladder.
The rungless
Does
ladder.
that mean 2 long sticks?
Yeah, it's useless for climbing.
Yeah, you'll learn what it means. But it's from a BBC article, and I'm going to quote that now. Quote, worryingly, the world is now interconnected and interdependent. In the past, collapse was confined to regions. It was a temporary setback, and people often could easily return to agrarian or hunter-gatherer lifestyles. For many, it was even a welcome reprieve from the oppression of earlier states. Moreover, the weapons available during societal disorder were rudimentary: swords, arrows, and occasionally guns.
No ICBMs.
No.
Boring.
Today, societal collapse is a more treacherous prospect. The weapons available to state and sometimes even groups during a breakdown now range from biological agents to nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons that fall from fucking outer space, man.
Continuing to quote, new instruments of violence such as lethal autonomous weapons may be available in the near future. People are increasingly specialized and disconnected from the production of food and basic goods, and a changing climate may irreparably damage our ability to return to simple farming practices. Think of civilization as a poorly built ladder. As you climb, each step that you use falls away. A fall from a height of just a few rungs is fine. Yet the higher you climb, the larger the fall. Eventually, once you reach a significant height, any drop from the ladder is fatal. With the proliferation of nuclear weapons, we may have already reached this point in civilizational terminal velocity. Any collapse, any fall from the ladder risks being permanent. Nuclear war in itself could be a result in an existential risk, either the extinction of our species or a permanent catapult back to the Stone Age. So,
That's a ladder match I want to be a part of. Jeez.
Yeah.
Next on WWF.
I wonder what the nuclear clock's at. The doomsday clock or whatever.
yeah, go ahead and look that up. Because we're going to get into our next section here after this break. But talking about civilization, since we exist where we do in history, it's really easy for us to be able to look back. We've got a whole lot of resources for us to just be a part of and to kind of do our research on. And rather than describing how failed civilizations happen, I'd like to look at specifically one civilization tonight. And obviously, historians will cover this more in depth than I will. And this shouldn't be taken as it should be a brief overview, but I think it's important to take a crack at what civilization's failing looks like. So tonight, we're going to be talking about a civilization that left a third of the world's population with DNA from this conquest. We're going to be talking about the fucking Mongolians.
Yes. The mighty Khans.
Snap.
It's actually really interesting. Before we go to break, it's a whole lot of story about how it happened, and then really quickly it just faded away, guys. Sam, did you have a thought?
Oh, I was going to say we are currently 100 seconds from midnight on the doomsday clock.
Hell yeah, dude.
So, minute 40.
Gotta rock that last minute 40, man.
Nice.
Yeah. So how are you guys feeling? Do you guys think civilizational collapse is inevitable?
Doomsday in a minute 40?
No, it's a metaphorical symbol of how close we are to annihilating ourselves with nuclear weapons. So, like, it's pretty much been, like, at least 3 minutes to midnight since the 70s, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, we've been, you know what I mean? Like, it's a button push away. It's
Like
been
if
a button
it
push
happens,
away.
it's about 3 minutes or a minute now.
Right.
Like,
With the invention of ICBMs, man, it's like a button. 10 minutes later, that's it. So that's why it's
sad.
just like, here we go. We're here
Well,
now.
and that's why, like, maybe civilization will collapse if we get a nuclear apocalypse. But
I feel like that's a stretch.
I mean, Chernobyl happened, and they were like, the whole world is gonna be irradiated.
Like
and that
everybody-
didn't quite happen.
That's like the sync
I
button.
mean, I don't know.
Like
That's-
everybody hits the button at the same time, and then that wipes out the world. But it's not going to happen like
And
that.
I don't mean to be a minimalist either. Like, obviously, shit's fucking real.
So think about how much nuclear waste or nuclear fuel was at Chernobyl, and like multiply that by some hundreds, and that's how much like nuclear material is like scattered about the world in missiles, in bombs,
Yeah, for real.
right? And when that stuff goes off, it atomizes. You know what I mean? It breaks down to other elements. It breaks down so completely. So it's a little different than stuff like vaporizing from its own heat.
Yeah.
And like being drifted by a strong wind.
Yeah. Well, Kevin,
You ready for this break, buddy?
Oh, dude, I'm totally ready for this break, dude. More commercials, yeah.
more commercials,
Yeah.
baby. We'll be right back with commercials.
This episode of Black Sheep and Bad Apples was brought to you by Bats.net. It's just a shipment of bats. Maybe for mosquitoes, maybe for a hobby, maybe to release in some random politician's house so when they come home, they think it's Dracula. What you do with them is up to you. Bats.net.
Hello. We'd like all citizens of our great nation to consider getting a laser-guided orbital defense lasso cannon. We,
Your generous supervisors
are now willing to offer big discounts on the cannons between the
19-inch,
variable detonation to the new
46-inch,
cluster launch. It's always been the American dream to own one of these
bad boys.
and with the anticipant space mime invasion, our losses are your gains.
God Emperor Justin Bieber,
Has issued an executive order to offer tax
write-offs,
and subsidies
these
to keep these sky snakes flying through the atmosphere, effectively giving you
the American
patriotic
consumer.
a steep discount. So order now from your local district commissary. Laser guided orbital defense lasso cannon.
Let freedom ring.
At the cutting edge of drinking technology is the Sugar Straw! Minimize your yearly waste and reduce your carbon footprint by drinking from the Sugar Straw. It makes every drink taste great. I've been drinking wine through it at home, and I like that it gets really sticky and stays stuck to the side of the glass. It also makes wine more palatable by adding like a nice little sugar flavor to it. So go out and get your Sugar Straws wherever you purchase your straw alternatives. And we're back. And we were getting into our conversation about Mongolia and the Mongolians. Now, the few things we know about the Mongolians, they really come from this book called The History of the History of the Mongols. And this was written by an anonymous author, and it was written sometime after Genghis Khan's death in 1227. And this is 80, so we've jumped a long ways forward. And again, what we're doing is we're looking at how civilization kind of expands, and then we're going to watch it crumble. Because this is one of the nations that crumble really quickly after. Did you have a thought, Sam?
No, I was just thinking it's a great one for that specific reason, because they really did like flourish, change the whole face of the world, force
And then
another
gone.
society into like literally forced Chinese civilization forward too. Like it's okay. I'll shut up.
Yeah, and so again, we're gonna get a lot of tonight's information from the secret history of the Mongols, and it was written again way back in the day. So it's kind of hard to parse some of this information with history. So we're gonna do our
It's been
best.
translated by white people.
Yeah, so we're gonna do our best tonight to kind of tell a brief overview of the story. Are you with us, Kevin?
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you guys.
All right, cool. So Genghis Khan, as he would later be known, was born with the name Temujin, which translates to blacksmith. Temujin was born August 18th in 1227. That's when he died, and so it's really kind of hard to parse down his actual birth, because some people say it was like 1162, but there's also like a 50 years difference, and so like it's a very difficult thing to really pin down when he was born. And so when you take any of the details of his birth date, just take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But what we do know is that he was born near Lake Baikal and grew up with 3 brothers, a sister, and 2 half brothers. He was given away for his arranged marriage at the age of 9 to his soon-to-be wife's tribe. So a part of their culture was like, you're going to marry this girl, we're going to send you off to go and live with their tribe. And so at 9, he went to live with them, and in typically culturally speaking around the time, he would, from 9 to 12, kind of exist with the family, and then at the age of 12,
to be a man.
Yeah, and then at the age of 12, he was
A man.
able to marry, yeah. And so, however, during his absence, Temujin's father was poisoned by the Tartars, and these were kind of the rivals of his kind of clan. And after the death of his father, he had to return home to take care of his mother and siblings. Now, he never really forgot about his arranged marriage, and 7 years later, he kind of followed the river that he lived next to back to find his wife, Bort. And when he got there, the dad actually did this really cool thing where he was like, hey, I didn't mean to leave your daughter out in the cold. I really want to marry your daughter. And the dad just united them as man and wife right there. He was like, I thank you for coming back and upholding your part of the bargain. We really appreciate you joining. And because back then it was culturally really helpful for alliances too. So this was Temujin fulfilling his word, you know. And so
I can see him showing up there with an apple, and he's just like, "Hey, here for your daughter's hand, I give you an apple."
I don't have much, but here, please take it. And actually, this is kind of a dowry culture, and we'll get into that here in a second. Again, he kind of, after he was married, he took Bort, which was his wife, and her mother to live with his family.
That's a cute name.
Yeah, and his dowry was a fine sable jacket. Well, Bort ended up kidnapped by a rival confederation and was given to one of these soldiers as a trophy of war. So there's a lot of raiding and pillaging going on now. And so when I say kidnapped, I mean that very generously.
Very generous.
Chick I marry is like, yo, I got a fine saber jacket for you. We hook up on this shit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be like
Sable. It was like
saber,
my hat.
saber, yeah, saber. What did I say? Saber.
Saber, yeah.
No
Saber,
sable jacket.
like
I'm gonna be like,
I have a sable hat. Yes.
Yeah, and so for about 8 months, Bort was held captive.
Baller shit.
count
dude.
me in.
And it's kind of hard for anybody to really determine whether Temujin's son, who later was born after this, was his son or whether it was the son of, this pillaging rapist at the time.
That's dirty, dude. It's dirty.
Yeah, and so there's a little bit of questions, but Temujin's father had this really strong relationship with a couple of other clans at the time, and to such a degree that the relation.
Traders.
But he had such a relationship.
Thieves.
The father had such a relationship at the time that they would call it an anda, or a sworn brother. And so this brotherhood was actually inheritable through these cultures. And so Temujin went up to these other clans and basically asked them for their help. And he offered the sable jacket as a token of friendship. And this was immediately accepted. And so with the rekindling of alliances, Temujin was able to gather an army in which to rescue his wife. And the secret history of the Mongols describes it like this. I'm going to quote. As the pillaging and plundering went on, Temujin moved among the people that were hurriedly escaping, calling Bort, Bort. And so he came upon her, for Lady Bort was among those fleeing people. She heard the voice of Temujin, and recognizing it, she got off the cart and came running towards him. Although it was still night, Lady Bort and Oaksen, another captive, both recognized Temujin's reins and tether and grabbed them. It was moonlight. He looked at them, recognized Lady Bort, and they fell into each other's arms.
That sounds like some fucking bullshit. If Matt was here, he would be like, I'm calling bullshit on this biblical ass wannabe shit. This is some history written by someone
Like a victor.
romanticizing this
Yeah.
from inside the Chinese Empire 100 years after they defeated the Mongols and their
Well,
civilization.
the wife was
disappeared.
still alive when he wrote it and like checked it, like edited
This was
it.
written, like,
and it was like, and then
a couple
I
of years
fell
after
into
his
her
death.
arms.
You think?
Oh, okay.
No, from what I hear, archaeologically speaking, it was written a couple, like maybe 10 to maybe 50 years after his death, which would have given the Chinese time to write something like this. So I don't really know, but this is where we get our sources of information. You know,
That's just my like.
Yeah, I gotta say, it sounds like a
Uneducated
Hallmark
opinion.
card if I've ever heard
Right.
one.
it really does, and it's honestly really cute because like when we think of Genghis Khan, we think of like this bloodthirsty dude that's like, I'm just gonna rape and pillage. But like this story of Temujin, which was his name before, really indicates that maybe there was like a soft side, and I doubt that. But
He
maybe
rapes and pillages, but he loves me.
Right, I mean, okay, like the guy's clearly charismatic,
clearly.
right? Like you don't become the mighty Khan without being a charismatic dude, right?
Yeah, he's a good speaker. He's a good speaker
right.
for sure.
They all are.
I mean, Ray Charles was a good speaker, but he did some scandalous shit while he was on the road.
Well, and by all accounts,
Hitler was an excellent public speaker.
Oh, we had to go.
Ray Charles and Genghis Khan. First time I've ever heard that comparison.
I mean, seems like a pretty fair comparison.
Yeah, and so one thing about this passage that I just talked to you guys about, it really indicates how much love Temujin had for his wife at this point. But this excerpt also shows like kind of an interesting combination of like blood, destruction, chaos, and love. And guys,
Chaos is love.
it was here where he found his two loves. First was
Oh,
Bort,
there, makes more
and the
sense
second
now.
was pillaging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When history talks about Genghis Khan, this is the moment that changes everything. When he goes to rescue his wife, like this is the moment that the historians focus on, and we're like if Hitler hadn't been rejected from art school, like this was the moment. You know what I mean?
There would have just been really awkward paintings.
Yeah, exactly.
Like about this guy who hated Jews.
He likes the killing. He likes the killing, but he loves me.
Yeah, and so not only does his love affair with war begin, he just immediately goes on to fight some more. Like he does not waste any time. And again, I'm gonna gloss over a lot here.
Bloodlust.
I'm gonna gloss over so much here. But he goes on to defeat the Meerkats, who were the ones that kidnapped his wife.
Meerkats?
The Merkits, Meerkits, I think. I don't know how to pronounce it
Sounds like
exactly.
that probably means meerkats.
Yeah. But these were the ones that had kidnapped his wife, and after he'd returned from bringing, from rescuing his wife, the local shaman, a person named Kokochu, made the proclamation that, quote, the eternal blue sky had set aside the world for Temujin, end quote. So he gets back from this big ass war,
Mandate of
fucks
heaven.
a bunch of people up, and this one dude's like, "You're meant to do that, bro."
Like, how many people really did he fuck up though in that first thing? Like, these are like nomadic horse tribes. Like,
But these nomadic horse tribes are like 50,000 strong
I mean,
sometimes.
still enough to have your like friend just be like, you did the right
And there's
thing,
also
bro.
settlements amongst these
I
nomadic
feel like
tribes.
the whole Mongol horde wasn't 50,000, but I don't really know.
No, it was way bigger. Like,
Really?
Huge, dude.
Oh, man,
Just
all
so big. I couldn't even tell you the numbers, like, because I don't really know. Again, I'm not like a historian about this time, but I know that like so many people went to war for fucking this dude. It's amazing.
When you're winning, everybody wants to be on the side of the winner.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump could only dream of like those types of numbers, man.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Although Genghis Khan could only dream about those types of guns from Trump, so it's a
Yeah, it's a
balance
give
here.
and take.
And honestly, I don't agree with all of Genghis Khan's political stances. I think he might have been a better president, though.
A vote for Khan.
A vote for Khan is a vote
2024.
Con 2024.
God.
Anyway, so not only does Temujin begin his love affair with war, again he just goes on to fuck up so many people, and
And fuck so many people.
And also he went on the hunt. He slaughtered the Jurkin clan brutally, which might be Jurkin. Don't know. And he killed all their nobility. And this was revenge. These
I mean,
air
you're
quote
not noble when you're jerk. Never mind.
yeah, these air quote allies, Gherkin maybe. These allies had stolen his property while he was off doing kind of Genghis Khan shit, and so he was like, "Fuck you guys, I'm murdering y'all,"
Stole his property, let their horses eat the grass there.
or stole his horses. Yeah, because again, we're gonna get into it here in a minute. But along this time, this is the biggest time to grow horses. If you are a traveler,
Raise, but yes.
you can grow as many horses. You can just plant horses in all your fields, dude. They're
sowing those
so many good
wild horse
Acres.
oats. Ugh.
Acres of horse fields.
So after he got done fucking up the Yurkin clan, he then focused on the Tartars and the Tartars. I don't know, but these were the people that had killed his father. And I want to read from a write up from Britannica here. So, quote. When his powers had grown sufficiently for him to risk a final showdown with the formidable Tartars, he first defeated them in battle, and then he slaughtered all those taller than the height of a cart axle. Presumably, the children could be expected to grow up ignorant of their past identity and to become loyal followers of the Mongols. When the alliance with Tongil and of the Keret had last broke down, and Temujin had to dispose of this obstacle to supreme power. He dispersed the Keret people among the Mongols as servants and troops. So he's like, "Fuck you guys,
Right.
You don't exist. You're my servants and troops."
He had a sign that said, "You must be this tall to survive."
Yeah. Continuing the quote.
And it was the height of an axle, like cart axle.
Cart axle, which is approximately 3 feet, maybe 4 feet, depends on the axle itself, but it's not very tall. And these are
Right, because
people
I
under
imagine they had
6
to
or
put
5.
like big fucking wheels on everything back in the day.
So these are generally speaking people under 7, but it's more likely under 5. And so I'm going to continue the quote here. This ruthlessness was not a mere wanton cruelty. Temujin intended to leave alive none of the old rival aristocrats who might prove to focus of resistance. To prove himself with a fighting force, and above all, to crush a sense of clan loyalties that favored fragmentation, and to unite all the nomads in personal obedience to his family, which is a long run-on sentence that Britannica wrote, and I hate it. I'm going to continue the quote still, though. And when, in 1206, he was accepted as the emperor to all steppes of his of all steppe people, he was to distribute thousands of families to the custody of his own relatives and companions, replacing the existing pattern of tribes and clans by something closer to a feudal structure. And so, at this point, he kind of does this emperor thing, like, I'm the god of everything. I'm a total dictator. He kind of Hitlers everything, and he's like, anybody who I've conquered gets pulled out of that region, separated, and dispersed throughout my entire tribe.
Right. That makes sense, because then they can't, like...
Who don't got nobody to fuck?
You
You gotta-
don't have anybody to trust. You're forced to trust, like, your captor in that instance, because you aren't ever going to see anybody from your village ever again. You'll never really be able to trust anybody, and so you just have to fall in line.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad. But this is also like when we
Fucking worked, though.
yeah, it did work. Yeah, and when we talk about like the rise of civilizations, this is what we're seeing. This is how civilizations rise. And so even in our modern aspect, this kind of shit is still occurring. Even to various degrees, but
Negging.
yeah. And also,
Much worse.
all this is happening while the Earth is becoming more habitable, guys. The normally frozen, arid steppes of Mongolia had been experiencing more warm, wet climates as the Mongolians had rose. So they literally risen out of this chain of events. And so I'd like to read from a Time Magazine article, rather, briefly kind of, it talks about that just a little bit. And I quote, "A fascinating new study in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences demonstrates the rise of the Mongolians may have owed just as much to beneficial changes in the climate that made the grasslands of the Mongolian steppes green and verdant, fueling the horses that were the backbone of the empire's military. Climate change had helped make the Mongol Empire possible." So
Makes sense.
Yeah, and so when we talk about how civilizations rise and collapse and stuff like that, getting into the climate, this is real. Like these steps that the Mongolians are trying to take over have never been this green. They've never been this
So-
easy to run across.
Never
In
been
like-
that warm.
In like
Yeah.
modern day age, the only people bitching about global warming is the people that's not benefiting.
Well,
So that means there's like a whole other half of people out there that are like, fuck yeah, global warming, this is awesome.
so I mean, I see why you would get to that spot, but that's just unequivocally not.
You don't
correct.
like it, I know.
It's just not correct. Like climate change is occurring at a vastly more rapid pace than that. You know,
Climate
what I mean?
change during
That
this
was-
time was way different than
it's
climate change now.
Slow, very,
Was.
very, very slow. Right. The stuff we're causing is occurring exponentially faster, and that's the kind of stuff that things don't adapt to. Right.
Yeah. And so with Temujin's army kind of expanding with the aids of his friends and obviously like the moderate climate, he became friends and ally with this guy named Jamuka. And with this, Temujin was kind of focused on trying to become the supremacist of the steppes. He really wanted to become the owner of everything. And it's not really known what transpired, but a year and a half after their alliance, Temujin and Jamuka got into like an argument. And again, it's kind of hard to tell, but the result was Temujin, like his wife coming up, Borten, and being like, "Hey, Jamuka's gonna fucking ditch you in war. You fuck that guy. Like, he's notorious for leaving people in battle. You shouldn't trust him at all." And so Temujin kind of took his wife's advice and was like, "You know what? Fuck you, bro." And he deserted Jamuka. And the funny thing about this was Jamuka's men left him to join Temujin. Well, at least some of them anyway. And later a man tells Temujin of a vision he had, one where he would be the lord of everything, as decreed by the heaven and the earth. This may have been because people at this point in time were kind of already predicting a war between Jamuka and Temujin, and perhaps many of these people were trying to align themselves with one or the other. Well, especially Temujin, 'cause he was murdering everybody at the time. Like, they were really, they were so afraid of everybody at this time. And at this point, though, everybody knew three things. First, there was a power vacuum that existed, and one out of two men were going to take the spot, and three, only one was going to survive. So there's like now there's this huge like this Siberian steppe has all these clans that are like, "Oh fuck, man, I don't know which side I'm going to be on." And it's very like this might almost be like one of the first civil wars that's kind of like going on here because there's all these different like hierarchies and these people that are trying to really gain control over a singular nation that's in development already. Like regardless of who would later become Genghis Khan, all of this stuff is kind of in motion. But it's really this one guy that's kind of taking leadership. It's pretty cool. And as these various clan leaders like began to take sides, some wanted to make Temujin like the Khan of the Mongols. He wanted them to be like the royal king. And the terms by which he would later become their leader was very simple, and it was simply based upon their loyalty to the hunt and the war. And this suggests that people were actually not looking for they were looking for a general, but not like an authoritarian. They were looking for guidance, but they weren't trying to be governed, if you will. And it's like a really interesting time during this period because people don't really know who good guys and bad guys are. And I kind of relate it to like nowadays how I've got a lot of friends who don't know which news media source to read and stuff like that. And they're like, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? And they just pick a side because it sounds good. And like, I don't have any advice for that other than to like look at all your options. But like it's this very confusing point for everybody here at this point in time. And also what kind of like lends itself to being more confusing is that like the Chinese Jin, so China had set itself up and the Jin dynasty was here, and they'd kind of seen Temujin rising as a small-time chieftain and kind of thought like, how bad can he get? Like, he's not gonna get that bad, you know.
Like, what are these guys gonna do over here?
Yeah, like-
Let's just wait and see.
Like, it seems like he's got good intentions. He doesn't hate Chinese people. It can't go bad. And instead, the Chinese focus on Temujin's enemies, the Tartars. And again, like the Chinese Jin and Temujin move in together as a frontal assault and a reverse assault, and they kind of go and dispatch these guys. And during this war, the Chinese Jin and made Temujin and his war partner Tongriel, they made them wangs or princes. And the Jin saw Temujin as like kind of just again like he's got a little country up north. We don't have to worry about him. But Tongriel, however, wanted fucking power and allowed himself to partner with Jamuka in a war against Temujin. So like now all these people are like trying to alliance against each other, and it becomes kind of this world war of Serbia, and it's just so interesting. And so Tongriel,
Serbia?
not Serbia, Siberia. Yeah,
I was like,
thank you.
wait.
And so as I said earlier, Tongriel and his Kedet people were defeated and eliminated. And in the west too, Jamuka, he tried to form this coalition with the Naiman ruler. And Jamuka was doing this because he was starting to see what Temujin would later become. And he also did this because he was a gigantic coward. Like, Jamuka is fucking hilarious. So I'm going to read from a little bit from Britannica here. Quote, "The break with Jamuka brought about a polarization within the Mongol world that was to be resolved only with the disappearance of one or the other of the rivals," meaning Temujin or Jamuka has no advocate in history. The secret history has much to tell about him, not always unsympathetically, but it is essentially the chronicle of Temujin's family, and Jamuka appears as the enemy, albeit sometimes a reluctant one. He is an enigma, a man of sufficient force and personality to lead a rival coalition of princes and to get himself elected Gur Khan, or Supreme Khan. Yet, he was an intriguer, a man who would take the short view, ready to desert his friends, and even turn on them for the sake of a quick profit. But for Temujin, it might have been within Jamuka's power to dominate the Mongols, but Temujin was incomparably the greater man. And so,
Sounds like a dick.
So Jamuka is just this pussy throughout history. He joins every army and runs away as soon as he can, and he's kind of this dude that like takes up this top dog theory where he's like, "I'm gonna bark at you through the fence," rawr, 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 rawr. And then the fence opens up and dude fucking dips. He's like,
Bounces
"Fuck that,
out,
bro."
dude.
And so, as I was saying, Jamuka kind of brokered this other coalition with the Naiman people to defeat Temujin, but very characteristically, he kind of deserted them at the last second. And so, again, he wants this power, but he's not willing to fight for it. And because he dips, the Naimans lose hard. So Temujin is taking over the country at this point due to this coward general dude.
Just fucks him over. He's just like, well, I thought he was supposed to be here at 1. What the hell, dude? Where is he?
And dude's like, "Nope, I'm in Egypt." I don't know. He
Yeah,
just dips.
I'm in Egypt right now, guys. Sorry.
Fucking Ted
Yeah.
Cruz.
Yeah, dude. Jamuka is a Ted Cruz for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Topical.
Yeah.
Now, all of this kind of happens right before like 1206 AD. And this brutal campaign left Temujin as the master of the steppes. And I'm going to quote again from Britannica. Quote, "In that year, a great assembly was held at the river Onan, and Temujin was proclaimed Genghis Khan. The title probably meant universal ruler." So even historians are like, it probably was this. I fucking love that about history.
They're just like, we're going to guess. Whatever.
Yeah. And something we haven't covered is that like Genghis Khan had spies fucking everywhere, guys, and he was probably one of the first people that was super interested in intelligence gathering. And obviously it goes back a long ways, like intelligence gathering, but he was one of the people that focused on it. He was just he wanted to know what other people were doing constantly.
Charismatic and paranoid.
Yeah, and by all accounts, he was a goddamn genius. Like his rise to power was not a mistake. He you know, after getting Bork back, this was a very intentional thing.
Yeah, no,
Like,
this dude didn't have a 90 IQ.
no, he didn't. He didn't fall into this. And so, directly after uniting all the clans in Mongolia, an age of peace dawned over the empire. Infighting and clan rivalries were almost eliminated, and all the confederations had sworn this to the new Khan. Quote, "We will make you Khan, you shall ride at our head against our foes. We will throw ourselves like lightning on your enemies. We will bring you their finest women and girls, their rich tents like palaces." So they're like, we're going to bring all the bitches, dog, and if they got a super sweet tent, we bring that too.
Yeah, we're bringing you the tent. And any sable jacket we find. We know what's up.
We know what you like, dog.
What's up? You look good in black. You know that, right?
Yeah.
You the Khan. You the Genghis.
Now, the story of his death varies, but obviously Genghis Khan eventually died. And some say of infection, others off a horse, some more say he died in battle. Yet another says he was killed for being wounded during a hunt, and still another says that he took a wife from like a peoples that he conquered, and the wife like stabbed him with a hidden dagger.
Damn right she did.
Yeah, right. I'm going with that one.
Yeah,
Probably killed by one of his rape victims.
Yeah,
Sounds about right.
I assume that, and so we're going to talk a little bit more about his spies, but also like how he died and how he was buried here. So I'm going to quote Britannica. Quote, "Using an extensive network of spies and scouts, Khan detected weakness in his enemy's defenses and then attacked a point with as many as 250,000 cavalrymen at once. While attacking large cities, the Mongols used sophisticated sieging equipment such as catapults, which I talked about with throwing bodies over the thing, and mangonels,
Robbing bodies.
and even diverted rivers to flood out the enemy. Most armies and cities crumbled under the overwhelming show of force.
No fucking
And the
shit.
massacres that followed a Mongol victory eliminated the thoughts of further resistance. Those who survived, and millions did not, were granted religious freedom and protection from within the rapidly growing Mongol Empire. By 1226, Khan had conquered much of Central Asia and made incursions into Eastern Europe, Persia, and India. His great empire stretched from central Russia down to the Aral Sea in the west and from northern China down to Beijing in the east.
Gotta jump on that train.
Dude, what does 250?
You're
What
jumping
does
on
a
that
quarter
train if you
million
don't want to.
horses in full gallop sound like?
Yeah. And so
Like-
again, in 1226, he died rather, I'm gonna quote again. On August 18th, 1226, while putting down a revolt in the kingdom of Zhai, Genghis Khan died. On his deathbed, he ordered that Zhai, which was the Chinese force at the time, be wiped from the face of the earth. Obedient as always, Khan's successors leveled whole cities and towns, killing or enslaving their inhabitants. Obeying his order to keep his death secret, Genghis's heirs slaughtered anyone who set their eyes on his funeral procession, making its way to or back from Karakorum, the capital of the Mongol Empire. Still bringing death as he had in life, many were killed before his corpse was buried in an unmarked grave. His final resting place is still a mystery. So according to the Mongol tradition, you have to die without anybody knowing where your body is laid. And he literally slaughtered people. Like, he had people slaughter people to go and bury him. And then after the people returned, those people were slaughtered. Nobody got to know where he was buried.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Kill the ones that helped, then kill yourself.
What was that? There was like the Chinese emperor who, when he decreed that when he died, all his servants and like everybody who lived in the palace and all, like, they all went with him. And there's this great painting of like,
Go down with
it's
the ship,
just
bro.
straight up like a procession of people headed down into a gigantic pit where there's just like headsmen waiting. It's like, what the fuck?
Jeez.
Dude,
Talk about loyalty.
Yeah, for real.
some gnarly ass shit has happened in Asia that just makes like
Yo, if I'm dying, we all dying.
like,
like, oh.
not for nothing. It
I
makes
guess I'll follow.
it makes most atrocities like pale in comparison.
Yeah.
Blood in, blood out, bro.
Blood in, blood out.
What is that? Go put your lokes on.
So as we discussed earlier, like a big part of developing civilizations is exploration and expansion. And when this expansion reaches its upward threshold, it begins to decline. After Genghis Khan's death, many people disputed who the rightful successor was, and all this infighting it began, and other regional groups kind of followed their leaders, and everybody started just fighting, and eventually this entire system collapsed. And what I wanted to talk about a little bit here is kind of just how fascism in dictatorship works in this, like, it's almost a cult mentality, because
Very much so.
because you have to follow this one guy because of this certain belief in how things work. And so when it comes, like, when we get to the question of how civilizations collapse, I don't know the actual answer, but I know how they can collapse. And I think a cult leader mentality can be a part of that.
Zealotry.
Yeah, when you try to bring too much together.
Well, no, that's. I mean, okay, I see what you're saying.
Well,
But that
bro.
that zealotry that you see in cult followers or religious fanatics, whatever, is its own form of like destructive force. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't leave room for understanding, and like if you don't have understanding, like you're on that's a one-way ticket, dude. One-way ticket to societal collapse.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep. So that's the episode tonight.
That's it. Bye.
It's a civilization is a bubble that sometimes pops into smaller bubbles and then forms bigger bubbles. So how do you guys? Let me ask you this, Kevin. Do you think
Yes,
society
yes.
is collapsing currently?
It's like we pointed out with the doomsday clock coming up on like a minute 40. I think everything is inevitably going to fall at some point. So, in terms of predicting it, I mean, like you said, I mean probably a lot of factors that have to play into specific downfall of one country or one society. Are we seeing that right now? I mean, we're seeing some really fucked up shit going on right now.
for
That's
sure,
for sure.
for sure.
So I mean, who's to say what's going to happen in 2050 or 2085 or something? When we're all like old men, what the world's going to look like. But hopefully, peace and prosperity is something that we see in the future. But I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know, but I like your positivity. You're like, well, maybe we could pull out of
Maybe.
this. Maybe. Yeah.
Sounds like somebody that knows that we're doomed. You're like, yo, as
Yeah,
long as
in a
it
nice
works
way,
out
I'm
all
trying to
right,
say.
that would be really cool, but we're probably fucked.
Oh, nothing lasts forever.
Well, and I think when we're kind of looking at like the fall of civilizations, we really have to look at, like, it's not going to, at least historically speaking, it's not going to turn out to a Mad Max kind of scenario.
What language do you want
Never
to
in
learn?
history has has there ever been a civilization like there is right this moment, though.
Yeah,
And so we can look at those things, but we could look at those things and say, okay, given enough information about a civilization like this, we could pretty much figure out how it would rise, fall, and collapse. We are not any of those civilizations anymore. And I brought up the law of unintended consequences. When you have a super complex system, it doesn't matter what the system is, right? If you make any change to it at all, there's going to be some consequence. It might not be a big, like a terrible one, but there's going to be a consequence that you cannot predict. And so we have a super complex system as a global civilization. And by virtue of that, we have this risk of anything that we do to upset like the balance of these complex systems will produce an unintended consequence. And that's almost something you can't predict. You know what I mean?
it reminds me of like the chaos theory.
It's like we're going to end up, if we do fail, we're going to be sideswiped, like blindsided by whatever fucking gets us, It's not going to be something we see coming necessarily. It could be. It could just be like fucking right now the missiles are launching and in 10 minutes, You know, all of a sudden the screen goes beep and Kevin disappears and we get a little thing from the
They're launching every day. We just don't know about it.
goddamn Elon Musk.
Fucking Elon Musk.
That dude's not a human. Come on our show and prove it, dude. Come on our show, Elon Musk.
Come on our show, Elon.
Come on our podcast and prove to us that you're a fucking human, dude.
Hashtag ban
The
beef.
world needs to know.
Plug.
Elon.
We got beef with Elon. Not really. Love
Yeah,
your work,
let it
dude.
be known.
Love your work.
Well, anyway, this is Sean. What are your
Final
are
thoughts.
we dying?
I was gonna say fuck Owo Johnson.
Oh,
Who?
No, but do you think our society is,
Exactly.
society is declining or collapsing?
I think we're on an upward. It's like tripping up the stairs. That's kind of how I look at it. We're still moving upward, but we're tripping
We
upward.
got a lot of bang shins on the way.
Yeah,
That's how this
we're banging
podcast works.
sherds,
Sure, it's
whatever those are.
banging shirts.
We're,
There's a large pile of cans you can't see here.
we're banging shins. We're tripping upwards in that. So we're on a rise, but I feel like it's in a declining sort of way where you're like, I just need to get the fuck up these stairs, but I really feel like hurt about getting to the top.
well, there's this tumbling back down the stairs and like this expand. So there's this bubble and it expands and it contracts and it's always doing that. And that's kind of what I've taken away from like the research in civilizations is that like, you know, not to be cheesy, but you'll like this, Kevin. A quote from Jurassic Park is life will find a way, you know, and I don't necessarily believe that human beings will be wiped out due to like nuclear consequences. I don't necessarily disbelieve that either. But I think the fall of civilization is a little bit more subtle than we think it to be. It's not like a Mad Max scenario from what I'm. It's just my feeling.
Honestly,
of
I think
it.
it'll be something much more like if you watch the movie Interstellar. I think which you should watch if you haven't seen it. It's a really great science fiction movie, and it's really great because everything is very believable aside from this one fantastical element to the story. But the thing that's killing everybody isn't like a nuclear bomb or disease. It's a soil blight that's literally just stealing all the oxygen out of the atmosphere.
Spoilers.
Faster than it's very early on. It's not spoilers, but it's going to be something like that. It's going to be this environmental condition that we can't predict. And that we can't stop from happening, that disallows us to either make food or breathe. And there'll be nothing to do about it very well.
Yep.
You know? It'll just, the planet will die.
So,
Neat.
on that positive note,
Doom and gloom.
Either that or the sun's going to get us.
Kevin, do you wanna plug your stuff?
Oh yeah,
Plug
dude.
it,
Yeah,
bro.
no, dude.
Plug away.
Every Friday, dude, check out the podcast that no one listens to, and every Monday, check out Are You Ready, a professional wrestling podcast.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Where do we check those out?
Dude, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all the major podcast networks, YouTube. We're there, dude.
Sweet.
Hell yeah. So you guys
podcast?
heard it here, our first episode, not quite crossover, with Kevin Porter. It's been a
Yeah,
absolute
he just paid
pleasure.
$50 to be able to say that stuff. That's awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
I know, dude. You guys are so generous of like letting me pay money for it, dude. I was.
Well, we got your back, dude.
Well, again, thank you, Kevin. It's been fun. Sean, Sam, thank you guys for listening to me tell you guys a long-winded story about how we're probably all gonna die someday.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to all my little
It's
segues.
Yeah.
Here,
Where's this river go?
lyric town. It's the end of the
world,
world.
and we know it.
No it.
It's the end of the world, and we know it. Yeah.
And I feel fine.
Well, again, thank you guys at home for listening to our long-winded conversation about if we're gonna die or not. Again, thank you guys all here for being on the podcast, and you guys at home, you can find us on Anchor, Spotify, Castbox, YouTube. You can find us basically everywhere. Thank you guys for listening. We're gonna get out of here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.